You said you kind of looked up to Stephen Colbert, and I remember too. I remember seeing him on The Daily Show, being like, "Oh, this is like kind of an interesting character." And then I would watch him on the like get his own late night show, and then especially through the pandemic, I was very turned off by just like what a corporate shill he's become, especially for big pharma, especially during the pandemic. And I wonder
You
if
weren't a fan of dancing vaccines? You didn't think that was
no,
the funniest
God,
comedy segment you've ever seen?
did you have a similar feeling? Like, God, these people
So,
these comedians I
y-
idolize have changed or are kind of bought, paid for.
yeah, I did to some degree. There are still there's comedians on the left that I still love and think are funny. But I think what disappointed me with Colbert, it's still kind of weird to watch his show because he's such a funny person. When you look at Strangers with Candy, when you look at The Daily Show, when you look at the Colbert Report, he was doing a conservative character, but it was funny in this way that, whether he was making fun of your side or not, it was hilarious. It was such a smart show. And I was excited when he took over the Late Show. I thought he would be great for that spot. And, partly because of, the Trump derangement syndrome and partly because of the pandemic, it became this very preachy, morose, one-sided, like political diatribes. And it seemed like it lost some of that humor that made everybody love him. And I know there's so many talented people that work on that show also. There's a lot of funny writers and comedians that are involved with it. And it just seems something with his tone changed. And it was disappointing to see that with him and a lot of other comedians where they started to put the politics first. It felt like, one of the things that I think made Jon Stewart's Daily Show what it was is he was just a brilliant comedian. And that show was not, designed at first to be an overtly political show. When Craig Kilborn first hosted it, it wasn't heavy-handed politically. And I think over time, as our culture became more politically charged, they kind of put the politics more and more forward. And when you have shows, now like the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, it seems their audience wants that. So I get they have their audience that likes it, but it does alienate half the country. And then, I think there's sort of there's an inverse of that on the right too, I think, where a lot of right-wing media will criticize shows like Colbert or SNL for going too hard left on the politics. But then I don't know that I see much from the right that's not the inverse of that. They'll criticize going for clapter and they'll criticize being biased and doing stuff that alienates one half. But, I don't see many people that don't already agree with, say, Daily Wire going to check out Daily Wire comedies. They're not necessarily doing the sort of broad comedy that everybody used to come to get. Like everybody used to watch Johnny Carson. Everybody used to watch Conan. And it was because they weren't super heavy-handed politically.
They were good at being neutral, and they had great personalities that even if they did show their hand, like to where they were politically slightly, the audience would forgive them because they're just such lovable personalities. Yeah. Whereas like Colbert is not a lovable personality in his role as late night host. He's very unlikable, I think. And that's a good point that you're making. Like, why don't sort of right-wing outlets make it more politically neutral? I think the right wing will always feel like, well, we don't have the leg up because we are not. The establishment media is always going to be left wing. Like Hollywood is left wing. The late night shows are going to be inherently left leaning, and I think the right people on the right still feel like they're the underdogs in the sort of media landscape. We've got to kind of make our own way. And if you look at Daily Wire is our only example of like folks on the right making they're barely making comedy content. I think they're just in their infancy in terms of bringing people on, or just I'm not sure what their inner workings are like, but I think they've made one, maybe two comedy movies, and it's not their main bag. I feel like news and interviews are their main focus. That it doesn't seem like to me like they're really trying to be a comedy powerhouse, which I would love to see somebody and do that.
Yeah, and I think there are some people in right-wing media that I think are really funny. Like I like Dave Landau a lot. He's over at
Dave is great.
And I think one of the great things about Dave is he's somebody who comes from a comedy background. He's an accomplished stand-up comedian. He kind of has that experience and that sensibility. I think a lot of what happens on the right is there is this right-wing media distaste for mainstream left-leaning politics or comedy rather. But then, you know, what I love about Dave, like I said, he has this comedy background. A lot of the people that they kind of try to put forward are either political pundits or right-wing media figures that then try to be funny. And there's this immediate sense. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And you can tell someone like me or you who's done stand-up. I mean, you started stand-up even before me. I started in 2010, 2011. And that's what I kind of found a little bit, I rolled my eyes with the Daily Wire. I'm like, they're just having their people that work there that are news people, that are like politics people. Just kind of like, I feel like forcing them into a comedy role. Like, yes, I love that they brought on Tyler Fisher and maybe a couple others that are genuine comedians, but I was like, oh my God, news people trying to be funny. Like, I'm cringing. So that's what I said at the time. I wish they would bring on more people who have more of a solid background in comedy and comedy writing rather than like, I think I'm funny and I'm in charge of this whole thing. Anyway, why don't I just put myself in? And I was like, ugh.
And this is the whole, this is the whole industry also, but it's especially in right-wing media. They're also very social media obsessed because that's where a lot of their platforms and their fan base comes from. And so, you know, when you have, like if you look at SNL or The Daily Show or Conan back in the day, they're going out to improv theaters looking for talent. They're going to the Ivy Leagues for the best comedy writers that are out there working for, you know,
Why do you think the Ivy Leagues have the best comedy writers? Because that is my criticism of SNL, that it's too much incestuous, like fishing in the same small pool.
So I don't know if I would still say the Ivy Leagues have the best comedy writers because the Ivy Leagues are in their own political disaster right now. I feel like
it's a woke dumpster fire.
Yeah. But, you know, I think back in the day, it takes a certain amount of intelligence to write good comedy. Even if you're writing about stupid things, even if you're writing dumb characters, there's an intelligence that it takes. And I know a lot of both stand-up comedians and comedy writers, it's very common for them to have a background in things like law or philosophy, because they're these things that kind of teach you to think, like make illogical arguments or sort of, you know, see the logical flaws in life. And kind of draw attention to that absurdity. Yeah.
I've always had an interest in like psychology, like why people do the things they do, and like almost kind of like arguing for the other side. That's where a lot of comedy is.
Yeah. And that was one of the funny basis of the Colbert Report when he was kind of doing that character and he was making these funny illogical arguments from you know the right, even though he wasn't on the right. But yeah, I think that's there is an intelligence, I think, that you need for a lot of comedy writing. And I think that's why at least at one time the Ivy Leagues were you know, one of the best places to look for that stuff. And then what I was going to say though about conservative comedy, to bring back to that, when they're looking for political pundits or people who already have a big social media following, they're people who are big that then try to be funny. Whereas I think, you know, they need to look at, if you actually go out to comedy clubs and see who's the funniest person here. Because I think you will find, when I go out to comedy clubs, there certainly aren't a lot of conservative comics, but there's more than what you might expect. And there are some, I think, that are very funny. And there's some that are kind of more moderate. They might not be on the right, but there's a big pushback now against things, you know, like cancel culture and woke culture, or even people that maybe didn't traditionally identify as being on the right. When you go out to actual comedy clubs and open mics, you do hear those kind of perspectives at least more frequently than you did 5 to 10 years ago. And, you know, I would like to see them kind of develop, you know, content and personalities from the comedy world, rather than looking who's the current biggest right-wing media star and let's try to make them be funny. Because yeah, I think that's one of the problems. I think a lot of the right-wing media sites, they're run by people who don't really have a background in comedy. They want to be funny, but they don't have a background in it.
But similar to the same reason why you have comedy club owners going to the latest or like management companies going to the latest like big TikTok star. I mean, like, ooh, you have this huge audience.
Yeah.
Can you just figure out, hey, Pinky Patel, can you just figure out an act, something to do on stage for an hour? We can sell tickets. We know we'll sell out a whole weekend. And that'll be that. Same thing with, like, I remember when Jeremy Piven was coming up, I did a show with him at the Off the Hook Club in Naples, Florida. They had his name as a headliner on the marquee. He did, I think, 18 to 20 minutes. I was one of maybe 4 openers for him that night. And I remember people were walking out, leaving like, when is he going to come on? Like, this show is not what it was advertised as. I remember like the owner at the time was like blaming me, like I was too dirty and that's why people were walking out. I'm like, no, because they probably expected Piven to be on half hour ago. But again, he could sell tickets. He had the built-in audience, and that's why, you know, and I understand the perspective of the comedy club owner. That's like, hey, they have to keep the lights on. They have to, and it takes longer. Like, of course, the right thing to do is to go into the clubs and recruit and scout who is funniest and build from there. But a lot of times the funny people don't always have the biggest audience and aren't going to sell the tickets, which is a shame. But that's how it used to be. Kind of in like the golden era of stand-up, like 80s and 90s. You just needed to be funny and you needed a scout to see you, and then that would be that. You'd have a whole career. You'd get a late night spot, you'd get a sitcom, and then you'd get a traveling tour set up for you. And now you got to do all of that yourself.
Yeah. And I think it is a shame in a way, because I've always struggled with social media because I'm not the most social media savvy or active person. And I think a strong argument can be made. It's always helped comedians or any artist to have a knack for branding and self-promotion and marketing yourself. That's always been a part of it. But on social media, where it's just one person and you're the producer, you're the promoter, you're the artist, it's tilted the scales, I think, in favor of some people who are it's like the primary skill they have is marketing and branding and self-promotion. Like, I think it's in one of the 48 laws of power. There's one that's court attention at all costs. And I think there are people on social media who they just they're good at drawing attention to themselves.
Like Alex Stein, Leonardo Joni has been good at that lately.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Alex Stein, speaking of conservative personalities that shouldn't do comedy.
Oh my God. Let me get my sound effect out. Oh my God. I should have my drops ready. Oh.
But he's another one. I think it's to that point where he's an internet troll who's drawn a lot of attention to himself. He did those viral videos where he goes to these town hall meetings, and those went viral. And those bits, I think, are good in themselves. I get why people, but if you look at his, I'm not a fan of his stand-up. I don't understand his appeal as a comedy person. He's like Steven Crowder. He's like Steven Crowder 2.0. It's that
he has gotten a lot stronger with his stand-up. Like I have had him on a bunch of my shows, and even like Lila Hart opens for him frequently.
I like Lila. Yeah, I've done shows with her in Dallas before.
He has gotten stronger, but like, yeah, I feel like with Alex, he has this constant pressure on him. Like, what is going to be his next big viral moment? How is he going to, because that is what keeps his show going. That's what keeps his paycheck coming. That's what keeps the lights on for him. You know, that's how he first found success, was from these huge viral moments rather than like
being good at comedy.
Yeah, I mean, for him, that's probably most. I'm not saying he's not good at comedy, but it's kind of like, it's, you know what I mean? Like a bear in the zoo, they got to figure out what button to push that's going to give them the biscuit. And for him, Alex learned how to get his biscuit, and it was from the viral moment. So I feel like he's kind of trained to do that. Like, that's success for him.
Yeah. And yeah, I would agree. That's definitely a big part of it. That is the root of it. And that's the thing, is now it's these moments that go viral, that draw attention to, like I said, to one person. And I think that's different from when you look at the traditional late night shows where they have a team of writers that have this writing or stand-up experience, and they're kind of, you know, like a show like a Conan or an SNL, even in their heyday, they have, 15 to 20 writers that are at the top of their league trying to churn out this much material. And yeah, when you're just looking for one personality on social media, a lot of it does depend on those viral moments. And that's where it comes back to, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing that people are trying to get just these moments that go viral, because I don't know that they're the best written comedy or the best performed comedy. They're just things that get attention. I think it does incentivize sort of trolling and being a provocateur and generating outrage rather than maybe making the best content.
Yeah, and I've known, God, incredible. Like, I know Nick DiPaolo and Joe DeVito are two. They're touring stand-up comics, but they also write for Gutfeld. And I'm friends with Joe DeVito, and I've talked with him like several times. Like, and it's this, I guess, this feeling that maybe a lot of writers have. Like, and I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but that you maybe burn through some of your best or some good material on the show, and you can't use it for yourself or use it in your stand-up.
Yeah. I've done Gutfeld a few times. I try to write to the topics that day, but there are times when a story comes up and you're like, oh, I could use this bit that I have about that and kind of, regurgitate it on there. And it is hard not to burn through material. And I think that's one of the things that's hard with comedians nowadays and posting your content online, because you have to build this social media following. And now, not just for, like TV jobs or media platform jobs, but even to get booked at clubs, they look at your social media following. And it's led to this rise in the like crowd work clips, which is always weird to me, because when I was growing up, I think crowd work is fun to see in a club. I think there's comics that are great at it, but it was never what attracted me to stand up. When I was watching, Comedy Central Presents specials in the 90s, or when you first looked up, clips of your favorite comedians on YouTube or online, it was their best written material. And now I think a lot of comedians, they're generating these moments of this crowd work stuff because it is a way to put out content constantly without burning through everything that you've written and putting it out there. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm surprised that people want to watch things like crowd work clips online so much. I think it's fun to see it live. I don't understand the appeal of watching it.
I think people like to see a roast. People like, is that, the type of person that's like, oh, yeah, roast my buddy, make fun of my friend, say he's fucking gay, there's something in us as humans, like we kind of like to see other people being directly roasted, and it's this feeling of like, oh, she was drunk, she spoke out of turn, or like she heckled, now like what's gonna happen? Because I've had a couple of like viral crowd moments that have given me some like good attention for like several months, and it's a really satisfying feeling to know, like, wow, this moment that wasn't planned, and it feels like you're riding a wave. It literally feels like you're paddling out. You see this wave coming, you're like, all right, I could crash and burn. But that moment, it's like, if it goes well, you're like, wow, I'm riding it in all the way to the shore. This feels great. You're truly put on your feet. It's like that. It's literally just a test of your wits, and not like, okay, no preparation could have prepared me for this. No well-written joke could have prepared me for this moment. It's just me against this heckler. There's something really exciting about that. But I know what you're saying. They have become popular as ways just to not burn through your material. And you look at someone like Matt Rife, who made his whole career, like, blew the fuck up just over his crowd work.
And I think there's something to be said definitely for those ones where something, uniquely, what would you like you said, like a roast, or if someone gets outraged or some joke lands perfectly where you have this interaction that works out. What I mean is, I don't like these where it's just 50 videos of different comedians asking a couple in the audience how long they've been together. Which is
okay. You see too many ones that are boring.
Yeah. Well, that are very generic crowd work, that are very almost formulaic. Yeah.
Yeah, it is easy to default to the easy questions, like, what do you do for work? How long have you been together? Because you even start to write jokes based on that. And sometimes you have crowd.
Because how long have you been together? It's always the same thing. If they say a short amount of time, they go, oh, you guys are probably still sleeping together. You probably still like each other. And then if they say a long amount of time, you go, oh, when's the last time you had sex? You guys probably don't even like each other anymore. It's just some angle of those two stock responses. And I just see a lot of people kind of do that same thing over and over again.
It's easy to be jaded as a comedian and be like, because like those are the kind of stock responses. But audience members, they're not, especially people that aren't really fans of comedy. Like, they might get out to one live comedy show like a couple times a year. So for them, that's like, oh yeah, how did they know? Like they completely nailed us. We've been together 10 years. Wow, like that's so it's probably like every other profession. Like, dentists watch other dentists work, and they're like, "Oh, really? You're gonna fill the cavity with that again? You don't know about this new stuff? Okay."
He's doing a hacky filling.
Yeah.